Hi there, I'm Carly, and welcome to this training module on human resources. I was very glad to have a partner for today's video, the North Central Regional Planning Commission. So a huge thank you to them for making this all possible. This is one of 10 modules in the entire series, so feel free to check out the others if you haven't already. And much like the project management one that started this series, this human resources module is most likely to have value for you, whether you're opening a grocery store project or any kind of business. So it is very general, I would say, not necessarily specific to grocery. The tools and techniques shared here, I would imagine, would translate across the board. So like all of these modules, the supporting documents that go along with this video are there, and you can find links to those below. You can check those out. I designed each document to stand by itself, so you really don't need to watch this video, but this video will be here to walk us step by step through the primary document of human resources concepts, all the way through all the templates that are there. There's a lot in this module just to give you ideas. It's just a big bundle of ideas. And then as much as you want to put into your human resource management is really a strategic business decision for you. One thing I would say, just kind of right off the bat, turnover is expensive. Meaning when you have people who come into your business and you train them, you get them up to speed as an active employee, and then they leave, you just spent all that time training them, and now you have to start over. That can be a very frustrating process. And in the heat of all of the grocery store operations, it can feel like turnover in your staff is like the last thing you need right now. And really good, solid human resources understanding and practices managing them, it can really help reduce the turnover, which, as far as the store manager is concerned, or whoever's doing the hiring, that makes life a lot easier on them. It makes life easier on whoever it is that's doing your training. A lot of times that can fall to the manager of the department. So again, that's a person whose plate is probably already full. So high turnover is making life harder inside the business than it needs to be. And so these are a package of tools aimed at helping turnover be less, helping employees find a place inside of your organization where they can stay and grow and develop for a good long while, where you can invest training into them and see it pay off for years into the future. So with all of that in mind, I'm going to pull up on my trusty device here, the Human Resources Concepts document. If you'd like to follow along, even open it, download it, make some notes, whatever works for you, that's there if you would like. So there are three different pieces of human resources that we're going to talk about: hiring, training, and managing/developing. So these are three different areas, three different skill sets all together. So we're going to break it down as much as we can. Again, keeping in mind that this is really just a guide to help get you started, and personalizing it for your business will be part of your process after this. So in the first category of hiring, the very first step, if this is a brand new build of a grocery store especially, is to determine your initial hiring needs. So what does your staff even need to look like? And if you're starting from scratch, this can be a really overwhelming step. So this next chunk is to help break that down as far as how would you really go about trying to figure out how many people should I hire if you've never operated a day of your business, right? So that's a guessing game at best. And these tools are to try to help us make as informed a decision as we possibly can, knowing that we will hit our starting target, and these pieces will help us figure out what is our starting target. And then as soon as you open and you get a sense of what is your actual weekly revenue, adjusting the schedule as quickly as possible will be very important. So we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. So the first step of determining your hiring needs is to set your labor budget. So how much are you allowing your business to spend on each payroll that goes through? So whether that's a 2-week cycle or however often you're doing your payroll. And I think a good place to start here for a grocery store is about 10% of your weekly sales. So this is where it gets complicated if you've never been open before. You're using your projected weekly sales. So let's say your projected weekly sales are $40,000 a week. So that means if you're doing a 2-week schedule, you have a 2-week cycle. So in the 2-week cycle, your revenue would be $80,000. And if you're working with that 10% figure, then that works out to using $8,000 as your labor budget. So if you can see how I put those pieces together, so really like whatever your weekly revenue is, that's the sliding scale that tells us how big should our labor budget be. The bigger our weekly sales, the more money that we can afford to pay our staff. 10% may look low compared to other industries. And what I'll offer there to just kind of put that in context is a roughly 65 to maybe even 70% of your weekly revenue will immediately be paid to your vendors. So your cost of goods sold is eating up like 2/3, if not 3/4 of your weekly revenue. So, that $80,000 for 2 weeks sounds like it might be a lot of money, but a solid 60 to 65 is immediately going back to your warehouse. So when we're talking about 10%, we really only have 20 to 30% profit margin to be pulling our labor budget out of. And that 25 to 30% profit margin also has to pay our rent and our insurance and our electricity and all of those other expenses that also are in the budget. So 10%, that's a good starting point. And then as you get operating, as you open and you see what your weekly revenue truly is, let's say in this example, you thought you were going to be doing $40,000 a week. So you're spending $8,000 on your labor budget to start. And 3 or 4 weeks into business, you see that the trend has gone sharply downwards and you're more operating at $30,000 a week. So now, if you don't update your scheduling, if you don't lighten up on how many people you're putting on the schedule, now you're overspending on your labor budget. Your labor budget is eating up more like 12, 13, 14% of that 25. So you need that money. You need that money for rent and electricity and all of the things that we just talked about. So making sure that labor, how much you're spending on labor, is very much adjustable based on how good or not your revenue is at any given time. So the second step of making a mock schedule is basically just that. Like, let's pretend you did have a staff and you needed to make your schedule. What would that look like? So for example, we have 2 cash registers at our store, and in a busy time, we intend to staff both of them. All of the rest of the time, we intend to staff one of them. So I'm estimating what are the busy times. And for us, that's like 3:30 to 6 every weeknight, and Saturday, Sunday, late morning to over the lunch hour. That's like really the rush periods. And again, if you've never operated, you're guessing, you're doing your best guess. But then again, as soon as you do open and you are seeing when are those rush times, that you're adjusting, you're tailoring the schedule right to when do you need these people to be here to support your store's operations. Once you have your mock schedule, you can really look at how many part-time employees is it taking to make the schedule covered the way that I want it to be. Another example would be like if you have your meat counter is like an old-fashioned meat counter where all the meat is out in the open and the customer gets to pick whichever steak they want, and somebody has to be there to get it out of the case for them, weigh it, print a tag, wrap it up, all of that, and hand it to the customer. So if that's the case, then there's a decision of, do you need an employee behind the counter full time while the store is open? Does that meat counter have special hours where we just advertise that it's only open until, an hour before we close the meat counter? And then you're having to staff it less hours. So really it's up to you to decide like what staffing needs there are inside the operations and create that mock schedule. And from there, it factors out to, okay, well, I have 119 hours of cashiering that I have to do every week. When you look at this mock schedule and you add it all up, that's how many hours there are. So from there, that tells you, okay, well, if I had 3 full-time cashiers, theoretically, 3 people doing 40 hours a week is 120 hours. So bam, you're covered. If any one of them can't come to work, or they have an illness, or they, in today's day and age, they're down for any reason, and now they can't come to work, you now have 40 open hours on your schedule, and the only people who are trained for the job are already working 40 hours. So for them to cover this, not only does it put a huge burden on those employees, but you're also paying overtime. And that is definitely ratcheting up from 10%. You're eating up into your profit margin with every hour of overtime that you're paying. So when you look at 120 hours, it makes probably a lot more sense to say, maybe I have 1 to 2 full-time people who are doing 40 hours each. And then I have 10 part-time cashiers who are each trained on how to do the job. So that's obviously a bigger training burden on the manager or whoever's going to be doing that training. But the redundancy is there then if you have, let's say, one of your cashiers is out then, and that opens up their chunk of the schedule. One, if it's one of these part-time people, it's a way smaller chunk of the schedule for somebody to cover. And 2, you have, I think of that A and then 2. And B, you have all of these other people trained that maybe they can help and come in and cover the schedule during that time. So deciding how much part-time labor to use versus how much full-time labor to use is really a strategic decision up to you. It depends on how deep your staff goes, as far as like if the main person calls in sick, who's going to be there to do the cashiering? And that's the example I use a lot, because you can't run the store if you don't have a cashier, right? So like the whole thing falls apart if you don't have somebody at the cash register. You could have it where maybe the meat counters close down the last hour of the day, or the hot case is only from 12 to 1. So you only have somebody there to serve it from 12 to 1. So you can control a lot of those things, but the cashiering bit goes with your store's hours. So how many people do you want to have trained? And that's a strategic question that'll be unique to each operation. Next, thinking through the experience level that you're requesting. If you're asking for a manager, for example, that has a management college degree and 20 years of management experience in the retail space, you are going to pay for that level of experience. And so, especially if you're a brand new store, you can look at that higher wage 2 ways. One, it's an investment in, there's somebody there now who knows how to run your store. But 2, obviously that's a way bigger expense. If you're investing in your store manager, you have less labor budget left over to invest in all of these other employees that need to be there to provide the redundancy so that your store is always covered. So that's one option. The other option is to go low experience level. And what that does is it opens up your labor budget, because now you're paying that person less money, theoretically, for less experience. But on the flip side of that, there's probably going to need to be some training. There's absolutely going to be a learning curve. Basically, you get what you pay for. So again, this is a strategic choice point of figuring out, where do you want to invest, either through your time into training a lower experienced person, or your money, your revenue, your profit margin into a higher experienced person. Again, everybody's going to make their own choice on that spectrum. When it comes to employing high school kids, chances are you will have some, and the choice really comes based on your unique state's labor laws. So I've included the example for the Kansas labor laws website. So you're looking for something similar for whatever state you're located in. And this is what tells you what are the age restrictions around somebody being employed in your state. And for example, in the state of Kansas, If you are 15 or younger, then there are certain caps, certain limits of how much you can work. So during the school year, they can only work a certain number of hours per week, plus they can't work past 7 p.m. So if you're making the choice to hire a 14 or 15-year-old, that again is just something you're going to have to factor in. If you need your cashiers, your baggers, for example, to stay until 8 p.m., having a 15-year-old cashier is really inconvenient, because now who's going to cashier for the last hour of the day? So again, it depends on, if you're already closing at 7, maybe that's not a problem. So it really depends on your specific operations and what's going to work for you. But for that, I would definitely point you back to your state's website first and foremost to make sure you're sticking within the rules, whatever they are, and then decide what's acceptable. And last but not least, there is likely an age limit in your state as well around the age that you have to be to sell tobacco, alcohol, lottery tickets, any of those kinds of add-on features that your store may have. Just making sure that, again, if you're, let's say, for example, beer in the state of Kansas, in our city, you have to be at least 18 years old to sell grocery store beer. And that means that close up to the front end, whether it's the person who's scheduled to cashier or it's the cook or the baker who's doing the baking in the kitchen, who's just maybe right there, who could come out if she needed to and scan some alcohol, you have to pay attention to that as well. Like, do I have somebody in the store who is old enough to sell whatever products we're offering? So again, you can see how that'll be really specific. Next, I'll take us through some of the key roles in the store. And these are good to get a sense of early on, just to understand how many managers do you really envision running the store as a cohesive management team. First is the store manager, the person overseeing the operations as a whole. Naturally, their attitude and their temperament, their perspective of the store and of daily work will rub off on the whole rest of the staff. So if you meet someone and they have brilliant grocery experience and they're a negative Nancy, I would strongly urge to really consider, is that the person that you want influencing the rest of your staff on a daily basis? Because even if the store manager isn't the person running the register or helping people at the meat counter, if they're setting the tone and they have a pessimistic, negative attitude on a daily basis, the rest of the employees feel that. And now every single person that your customers are interacting with inside your staff are all experiencing that same negativity potentially. And the same is true on the positive end of the spectrum. If you have a store manager who's excited to come to work every day, is passionate about the store, passionate about adding value wherever they can, that mentality and mindset trickles through the staff as well. So by far, the most important hiring decision of your grocery store is, who is your store manager? As far as crafting the job description for the store manager position, I did put a template in the folder for store manager. Again, this is going to be highly specific to your operations. That could at least be a skeleton to get you started. And then the other thing is, I'll point you back to the operations module for the operations overview, which again, you can expand yourself to add whatever you need to, but that is a good baseline for empowering the store manager to oversee operations. That's what they do, is manage week-to-week operations. So I point you back to the operations module itself, is where you can find that supporting document. The next key role is the bookkeeper. So you see the responsibilities there. Cash flow is very chaotic inside of a grocery store. There's a lot going on between all the different forms of payment that you take, the charge accounts that you might operate, all of the different vendors that are constantly sending invoices and need to be paid, all of the different cash flows in and outs. And so expecting the store manager, who's responsible for the daily operations, to also be responsible for managing the financial side, that's asking a lot. Again, not that it can't be done, not that there aren't plenty of people in the history of grocery stores who have done it, but it is extremely difficult. And the chances of something falling through the cracks, either on the financial side or the operations side, it just skyrockets when you're going to pile all of that responsibility onto one person. So having a separate individual whose job it is to watch the cash flow, that's all they do, highly recommend. And then last, think about the department managers that you see. And these could be, the store manager could have specific departments that they're responsible for managing, but you may also have a meat manager who, again, it's their entire job, their entire focus is to focus into the great amount of detail that goes on inside the meat department itself. Same if you're operating a bakery deli, so much detail. It's a little mini store in and of itself inside this bigger operation. So again, it makes really logical sense to have multiple managers in the operation so that you're dividing up that responsibility. And by doing so, you are doing lots of good things. But one is increasing the redundancy. So again, let's say your store manager has a death in the family and now they're out of the store for a couple of weeks in terms of that whole process. And that allows all of these department managers to step up and work together to run the store. If you have one person who's responsible for everything all the time and that person needs to go away, they're there holding the walls up. So it really just, again, makes life so much easier on everybody when there's that redundancy built into the schedule. The other piece is that it lowers the chances of something falling through the cracks. If I have 40 hours a week and you've assigned me 40 hours a week worth of responsibility, the chances of me managing that is really good. When you look at a grocery store, especially one where you have lots of different departments going on, the amount of detail and responsibility included is easily enough work for multiple people. And I feel like I'm drawing this out because there's something of a shift in mentality in grocery stores in general. This is from my own personal experience, where there's an older generation who was used to wearing all of that responsibility and that managing a grocery store was an 80-hour-a-week job and that was the level of commitment that it took to do this work. And much like the dairy industry, I also grew up very adjacent to the dairy industry, which is also a place where it just has been assumed by older generations that this is a 100-hour-a-week job. That's what it is. And so you're seeing family-run dairy farms going by the wayside because nobody wants to do that. That's not today's culture. That's not in our society at this point. That's not the work-life balance that people of a younger generation are wanting to have. So a model like this, where each person is expected to do their part, but nobody's responsible for all of it. And that allows for so much flexibility and so much teamwork to help each other out, pick up the slack, pick up the extra. It just makes life easier on everyone. And again, I think in terms of transitioning, if you're building something that you don't want to personally run for the rest of your life, then setting it up in a way where it's as easy on people as it possibly can be just makes good sense. So to help with this, I have provided a template of what it might look like to break the manager level responsibilities down into different department manager positions. So on that template, you can see how the store manager keeps a good big chunk of responsibilities. And then there's also just little pieces that are easy enough to delegate to someone else and make it their responsibility, and not delegate in a way where, when I'm speaking about department managers, I'm talking about true energetic delegation, where you take it off of the store manager and you put it on the responsibility of someone else. So it's not the store manager's job to come along behind the department manager and check that they're doing their work. The department manager is expected to be a manager of their responsibilities. So a document like this is meant to help people work together so that everybody can see whose responsibility is what. So you have a question, you know, right, who to go to. Oh, well, it's about scale tags. And, I didn't like the ones we got last time. And I wanted to talk to the person who orders those. So I check and, oh, yep, that's this person. So I go ask them. So it empowers lots of different people to hold the reins on being responsible for different pieces of the store. So creating job descriptions is something that isn't necessarily required. You don't have to do this. There are lots of ways to just do a general all call, especially if you're just starting out and just, we don't even know yet what our positions look like. So apply, we'll interview, we will find a spot for you. If you have specific requests, let us know and we will factor those in as much as we can. That's how we did it. There weren't job descriptions back when we very first opened, but since then, I have developed some job descriptions. So those are the templates, the few examples that I've given you. There's one for the store manager. There's one for a lunch manager. So that kind of points you into a department manager role if you were trying to hire for something like that. And then the last one is a cross-functional position. So this is an example of we wanted to work with someone who showed up, applied to work at the store, and they were extremely talented and were looking for full-time employment. And in our small operation, we really didn't have one full-time job. But in this whole we can delegate, we can pull pieces together, in that spirit, we absolutely had 10 hours of this a week and 15 hours of this a week and 10 hours of this a week. And we added it up into 40 hours for this person because that was how much we wanted to work with them. We wanted them to come and be on our team. So I wanted to just give this example as far as the level of flexibility that there is to not get stuck in thinking this is this job description and I need somebody who's going to do exactly what I wrote here. Being open and flexible and meeting the people who show up and want to apply to work at your store, especially if you have a limited job pool, being open and flexible can be really helpful in working with the people who are there and meeting their strengths and their talents and what they have to contribute and making it work as a win-win for your store and the employee. Similar to the job descriptions, I don't think that you need to sit down and write out an interview process, but I do have a template example of what a documented interview process has looked like. This was for the lunch manager position. The goal with drafting your interview process, or at least putting some thought into what does that look like, is that you're going to come out the other end with an employee, with a new hire who is a good fit and is going to be receptive to the training required, to the responsibilities that you're asking of them, and will find success in the position long term. That's every hiring manager's goal, I gotta think, is to have success in the long term with your new hire. Because again, like we talked about, turnover is expensive. So you see, like through this example, the first step of the interview process is a phone interview. So that is intended to be low effort on the part of the manager, whoever's responsible for handling that phone interview, that first interview, because that's really where you're screening people to see, are they serious about the position? Do they have a good understanding of what we need? And are they able to offer that? Is it a good fit? It's just an easy way to feel that out without spending a lot of time. And then the second level is an in-person interview with not only the department manager, but also the store manager. So now there's two different perspectives interviewing this person, again, asking ourselves, does this feel like a good fit? And if we've made it past that part, a hands-on interview step, which we have chosen in the past to usually pay this part, whether we hire the person or not, because we're asking them to spend significant time. A couple things with this is that, one, it allows us the ability to issue a schedule to the person in advance and then watch if they're able to show up on 3 different occasions on time. We get to see their attitude multiple days. There's so many different benefits to actually having them come and work with them side by side. Having them do the work is where we get the clearest view of, can they do the work, the way that they said they could. So those are just examples. And I would say, if you're hiring someone to bag groceries, AKA you're going to train them for 10 minutes and then they're pretty much good to go. You probably don't need to invest all of this effort into your interview process. A simple attitude check, an ability to learn, an ability to communicate, an ability to speak to the customer, like I could probably teach you the rest here in about 10 minutes. So yeah, those can be really tiny little interviews. When you're interviewing for a department manager, though, that person is going to have a lot of responsibility. There will be a learning curve to get them up to speed to really perform. So you're investing a lot of time into training them and getting them oriented into their position. So the more time you're going to spend, the more of a detailed, thorough, well thought out interview process you likely want to invest in figuring out what is your game plan on finding this person. So for job applications, I recommend having both an electronic and a paper version. You'll get people through your social media who want to fill something out online. They just like, hey, can you send me a link to your job application? Absolutely. Great. So there will also be people who come into the store physically and they want to pick up a job application. And either way, I think is great because you never know where a person is in their like physically to when they're messaging you on social media. They may be hours away and coming into the store isn't appropriate at that moment. So I don't want to turn them away. I also definitely don't want to turn away people who are physically coming into the store, as I personally think that shows a level of initiative that's really encouraging about how much they're actually seeking a job at this time. So having both, again, flexibility, meet people where they are. So for your electronic options, you can use lots of different systems out there. The one that we have used in the past is Jotform. Typically, these systems are free, and you just set up your application as questions. When they fill it out, it emails the responses to whatever email address you tell it to send it to. So that's super handy as far as collecting applications that way. That's also really helpful before you open. So before there's a brick and mortar place where they can come and pick up an application, the electronic applications, again, that's where we started before the store was physically open. And as far as the application itself, I have an Excel template that you can use as a starting point and customize it however you need to, and then print that off to have in your store. And the last section of hiring are the HR forms. So again, this is probably something where you want to look at your state's website specifically, consult your accountant, consult your payroll specialist. They will guide you as far as what are all the forms that you need the employee to fill out when they very first start working for you. If you've had multiple jobs, you know that the packet of paperwork is different every time, everywhere you go. So there will be a combination of things that are absolutely required from your payroll specialist in order to process this person through your payroll. And then there are things that are up to the discretion of the business. For example, the consent to drug test, the consent for a background check. If there are practices and processes like that you feel strongly about, make yourself a document and put it in your new hire paperwork, get them to sign it up front. So next we'll go through the training pieces. So this first part is the new hire onboarding process. So in addition to the packet of paperwork that you're going to have them fill out, there's a certain set of information that every single new employee is going to need to receive. So these bullets are just ideas as far as what that list might include, things like how to clock in and out, how to dress to come to work if there's specific things that you need them to know, or hey, grab one of these aprons when you get here and put that on, whatever it is. Employee safety. So if there's first aid kits around the store or evacuation protocol, tornado protocol, it really just depends on, what is your area. The process for both submitting time off requests by the deadline, whatever that process looks like, and then also what to do if you are scheduled to work and on the day of or the night before, whatever, you realize you can't work. What is the process for covering your shift or calling your manager? What do you need them to know about that? Walking them through the right that they have to their breaks, which is something that according to your state law is, typically every 4 hours, they get 15 minutes. If they work 8 hours, you get an hour off for lunch or 30 minutes off for lunch. Consult your state website and then let them know what their rights are. Some people will choose not to take breaks, and that's fine. But as the employer, you are obligated to give them one. And so just show them, hey, here are the times that you're allowed to take breaks. Here's the process for going on break. For example, you may ask that they go and check with a manager, ask permission. Is now a good time for me to take my break? Yes or no? Especially if you're working with high school kids who haven't had a job before, they walk up to you and say, is it a good time to take my break? No, both registers are backed up out the door. Like we're in a busy moment. It's really not a good time to take your break. So if you could jump on a register and start checking out some customers, that'd be great. And once it dies down, then yes, go on your break. So especially when you're working with minors, it's important to remember that anytime we're working with human resources, there's always an assumption that training is required. It's hard to have expectations of people if you haven't trained them of what you expect, so that they can live up to that. And then if there are consequences or disciplinary actions or feedback that needs to be given, you have that baseline expectation that was communicated during training. And last but not least, cell phone policy. Are they allowed to keep it on them? Do they need to put it in their locker? What's the procedure for that? And then again, anything else that fits into that category of these are the basics of what every single employee is going to need to know. And then you get into job specific training. So this is where I have the template training competency by department. So when you open this Excel spreadsheet, there are multiple tabs down at the bottom where it is demonstrating that every single department/position that you hire for will have a different set of things that they need to be trained to do. So these range from cashiers to the department managers to people who answer the phone to closing managers, however you're choosing to segment your employees into responsibility level. With responsibility comes a certain level of knowledge and training that's required to be able to do whatever it is that you're responsible for. So for example, if you're hiring someone who's basically a cashier most of the time, but then you start allowing them to be the closing manager, that's a whole nother level of responsibility where they need to know how to get the key out of the safe to lock the front door. They need to know what is the closing checklist and how do I make sure that that all gets done? What's my responsibility before we leave? All of these types of things that maybe they didn't need to know that when they were just the cashier. So knowing what are the responsibilities, what are the trainings, it streamlines that process to say, if someone's going to move into a different responsibility level, that triggers such and such training that now needs to be provided. So next, on initial training and setting that schedule up, chances are if you have a brand new store that you're opening, there will be lots of different training that you need to do with your staff so that everybody is ready at their battle stations day one when the store opens. So this template that I've left you here is really aiming to try to look at visually what are all of those different trainings and how is it all going to weave together, and is it even humanly possible to deliver the trainings the way that you want it to be. So I have it sorted by day, by date across, and then by department on the columns so that you can see on any given date what training are we going to be doing in each of the departments, so that like your store manager, if they have a role to play in lots of different kinds of training, then they know where they need to be at any given time on that date of training, versus maybe the bulk of the training for the bakery deli, for example, is handled by the bakery manager. The meat training is handled by the meat manager, and then the store manager is just doing little functions in each. With this, though, you may have someone hired who is a cashier, let's say, and so you go through the cashier training competency. They are check, everything. And they have expressed interest that if there's more that you want me to do, let me know. And yeah, I'll be happy to do that. If you find a good employee, chances are that's what they're going to say. And so a good opportunity at that point to further engage them are to begin doing cross training and multifunctional training into other departments. And to do that, you don't have to take out the whole like meat department training competency. You could begin pulling just even one task at a time and say, okay, well, today I'm going to cover up front for an hour, and you're going to go back and learn how to slice and weigh and tag deli meats and cheeses, both to fill the door and to wait on customers as they come up. So, to be in the meat department, to have that be their job, they'd be required to know 35 different things. But today you're going to spend an hour and go do this 1 hour of training. And then that is, again, doing lots of good things for you. One, you're engaging with an employee who asked to be further engaged with. That's really important for your employees not getting bored and leaving. So that's, again, helping to keep them engaged and hopefully in the long run reduce your turnover. And second, let's say you have plenty of cashiers in the building, but what you don't have is maybe you had somebody call in sick back in the meat department. So now we're at the rush period and you only have one person instead of your normal two back there. Now you have an employee who you can say, hey, can you help back in the meat department? Can you jump back there and run the deli meats and cheese side so such and such can run the raw meat side? Yes, absolutely. They're trained. They're ready to go. You're golden at that point. So the cross-functional, multifunctional, again, it's so flexible. It doesn't have to be somebody who could literally, like, the meat cutter called in sick, so now this person's going to go back there. They may not know 99.9% of what goes on in the meat department, but they can run the slicer. They can help out in a busy time. They can jump behind the counter and wait on some customers. So exposing your staff to those kinds of cross-training opportunities as often as you have capacity to do it, I, again, cannot recommend it enough. This next one's more of just a mention, but the State Department of Agriculture food safety inspector for your store will come out and do a free food safety training for you and your staff. I'm not entirely positive how often they're willing to do that, but I know at least one time they will come out, and I believe on a recurring basis, on a certain frequency, they'll come back out and do refresher trainings. So not that these are required, these aren't to insult your employees and say you don't know, but it never hurts to do a refresher. It never hurts to hear it again. It never hurts from the standpoint of the organization to be offering those kinds of trainings in the event, in the future case, that you may have an issue. Again, these help us do a backstop of baseline expectations to point back to if ever we need to trace back an issue, offer feedback, disciplinary action, any of those kinds of things. And last in the training section is documenting ongoing training comprehension. So this is an example where, let's say you have 20 people on your staff and they are all fully trained, they are functioning, they're thriving, they're doing a great job. And then you update your internal process. You switch from having a paper gift certificate to you've now implemented having plastic gift cards. So the process of how to sell a gift card has completely changed. So that has nothing to do with the performance of your employees. That's an internal process that now every single cashier that you have on your staff needs to be retaught how to sell a gift card. So how to activate one, how to process one if that's how they want to pay, on and on and on, what to do when it's empty, yada, 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 like all the different pieces. And you have, 20 cashiers that you need to retrain on your schedule. So that burden is how I'll put it, because it can be very complicated considering that over the course of the week, you may only have 2 or 3 people from that list of 20 in the store at any given time. So that means training them all at once isn't really an option. You could send it by email. Maybe they'll read it. Maybe you put something at the bottom that says, send me the answer to this question once you've read the above information, and you could check them off that way. If it's low stakes, you probably could. If it's something higher stakes, like how to sell a gift card, how to work with the register at all, typically I think that needs to be an in-person, on the register, showing them steps on the register type training. Again, a video may be possible if you want to deliver it that way. And again, try to ease your burden from having to train every single person individually. No matter how you're going to deliver this training, the template that I've put here is for signing or initialing training each individual person so that you know, okay, well, we've changed to these plastic gift cards, and I've initialed down every single cashier has been taught how to do the new gift cards. Great. And now we have online shopping. So I need to teach them how to print a picking ticket. This group of people needs to know how to do that. So like, however your processes and change management continues to move through your organization, this document can help track what are the trainings that are needed to keep the employees up to speed on the operations of the business. Last category, managing employees. So first up is workers' comp insurance. For more details on this, I do refer you back to the financial matters module where we go in depth on insurance overall. So there is more information there. But for the sake of the HR side of it, the only thing I'll say is to be sure to document thoroughly any injuries or incidents that do happen as soon as possible. So if you have someone cut themselves in the meat department and they go to the hospital, make sure that you are taking statements from any of the employees that were a witness to what happened, that you're asking the employee lots of questions and documenting their responses on that day. As much as possible, just to get the incident report together while it's still fresh in everybody's mind. Again, depending on how severe the injury is, will tell you what kinds of claims you need to file with your workers' comp insurance. And when the employee goes to the hospital, or if the employee has to go to the hospital, they will ask them when they get there, is this a workplace related injury? To which they should say yes. So that is just a very high level overview. Again, your insurance provider will likely have a lot more information around exactly what you need to do related to your work comp insurance policy. Employee benefits are another fun way to offer perks to employees and hopefully over the long term increase morale. So whether that's giving holiday gifts, either some type of store credit and a gift card, or company apparel, so that maybe you give everybody a hoodie for your store, something that they can use at work, but also get some good out of. Also, you get some marketing exposure out of that. Any of those can be win-win-win situations. Also, employee discounts are another easy way to give back to your employees, where maybe they're allowed for their entire family to use their discount, or maybe you just limit it to that individual, really up to you. So probably the biggest piece to managing your employees is creating the schedule. So making sure that your operation is fully staffed at all times. And that is where this is a big piece of time that the manager or whoever is making that schedule is spending each week or every couple weeks. And so I've given two different options for how you may want to approach this. Option one is somebody, the manager, whoever is making that schedule. And the second option is employees are self-scheduling, meaning that they have a blank schedule template where you've outlined these are the shifts, these are the hours that need to be covered. And then each individual employee is signing themselves up for these are the shifts that I am working. At the end of that period, when the schedule is filled out, all you got to do is copy it, send it out to everybody, you're good to go. And that option, obviously, you're not making the schedule. That's a huge time saver. The main reason it's a time saver is the time off request process and how flexible you're willing to be with your employees. And in a smaller grocery store environment, chances are you're likely not able to afford wages that are super competitive with big box stores and, corporate retailers, what they're able to pay their part-time people and their full-time people. So being flexible with your employees is another perk that you can offer that doesn't cost you anything except for your time. And so in both of these options, they allow you to be really flexible, where in that first option of the manager making the schedule, you would have to collect everybody's baseline availability, have that to work with as far as when you can schedule people. Like, I can't work Wednesday nights because I have youth group or whatever it is that they're requesting to work around. And then second to that is collecting the specific time off requests for that period. So I can usually work Thursday nights, but I have such and such family thing on that Thursday night, so I need that day off. So letting them request time off, again, it's a huge benefit back to your employees if you're willing to be that flexible. If you are, though, that obviously creates the task of how to compile all of those time off requests. So I used a schedule in my email, a calendar in my email where I could schedule each person's requested time off. You can build it right into the schedule. There are lots of different ways that you could factor that in. And with either option, be super clear with your employees around what is the process if you cannot work your scheduled shift, whether they signed up for it or you assigned it to them. Should they call you? Should they call their coworkers and see if they can find somebody to cover that shift for them? What is the expectation there? And set that right up front. So performance reviews, twofold here. So one is when you hire a new person, having some type of 45, 90-day review process in place is a great way to just make sure that you're checking in with this new employee and they don't have any questions, you don't have any feedback that you need to provide, everything is going along great. Or is there some feedback? Are there what needs to happen here? Is it just not a good fit and we need to figure that out earlier than later? Beyond that, though, you may choose to do performance reviews on your existing employees as a way to check in with them, not necessarily as a way to, you have to deliver a bunch of critique and criticism and feedback about how they need to get better. Mostly, it's a way for you to hear from your employee. So I left two different templates for the performance reviews. One is to use for all employees, and one is to use specifically for your manager level employees. So with the all employee one, it's super easy to use the form start doing, stop doing, keep doing. So from their perspective, what should they start doing, stop doing, keep doing? And what should the organization, the business, the store start doing, stop doing, keep doing? So that is a way for them to share their ideas, their feedback. What are they hearing from their coworkers, from customers, for them to be able to communicate with you. So when I say performance reviews, it's just as much an opportunity to give them good feedback and supportive comments and a listening attention as it is for you to deliver feedback to them. Not that you can't do that, and should, especially if you have something specific to say. I would just throw out there that it's definitely not necessary to come up with an opportunity for growth to give to somebody in a setting like that. If there's really not anything that you notice, it's perfectly acceptable to tell them all the reasons why you're satisfied with the job that they're currently doing, and that you just want to take this time to hear from them. Is there anything else that they want to learn? Is there anything else that they want to try within the store? Are they happy with their schedule? Is there anything else that we can be doing to keep you happy? Because we are so satisfied with the performance that you're providing for the store's operations. With the manager performance review, it's a little bit different template just because this gives them lots of flexibility and room to tell you, here's what my experience is in doing what you've asked me to do. So, rather than you telling them, here's all of my feedback about your performance, again, what's your feedback about how your job is going, how your responsibilities are going? Do you feel like we're doing a good job in the areas that you're responsible for? Do you feel like there are opportunities for improvement? And really, most of all, the way that I had it set up in that template is by day, show me what you do. Show me what's on your plate, how it breaks out day to day to day to day. And that is not meant to be like an all exhaustive list, but more a structure for a conversation where now, as an owner or the store manager talking to like a meat manager, for example, I get to step inside this person's shoes and experience their job with them as much as possible. And that just helps me listen to what they're telling me and the urgency of fixing the things that they're reporting need fixed, of innovating on the things that they say need innovation, what's going on in their world, and how can I be better up to speed by listening fully to what they have to say. Next is a fun little section on employee development. Personally, I'm a huge human behavior nerd, personality nerd. I love everything to do with all of these things. But I did want to share some of my favorites as far as relating back to employee development and relating to your employees as individuals, not assuming that all cashiers are the exact same. They have the same career aspirations, they have the same skill set, the same strengths and weaknesses. Every single individual employee that you have ever will be their own individual. And yet you may also see themes in the style of people that you hire. For example, a few of the options that I leave you here are Strengths Finder. So this is an option that costs like $8 per person, I think. And what it gives you is their top 5 strengths. So they answer questions about like basically what is their natural aptitude? What are the things that they just really like to do? They prefer to do these things. And it spits out at the end, what are the top 5 strengths? And if you look at the template from when I did this with my staff at the very beginning of my store, I had already hired, obviously, these are my existing employees and everybody takes it. And I put them all on this template under their strengths. So like on Strengths Finder, for example, the strengths are broken down into strategic thinking, influencing, executing, and relationship building. And it's no wonder that, I was hiring a staff of people to handle operations and customer service inside the grocery setting. And the bulk majority of the top 5 strengths that came back on my staff fell into executing and relationship building, and even more specifically, achiever, responsibility, restorative, and relator came back as clear standouts that I had very clearly hired a specific type of individual that would come in and not only handle the day-to-day work that needed to be done, but also be really nice to the customers. Like I heard a quote one time that was, we don't hire people and tell them to be nice. We hire nice people. So this, I feel like, is an exercise to get a bird's eye view on your staff overall and kind of like your hiring preferences. And then also get to know each individual, because some people really, really, really like to learn. And if you see that somebody has shown up on your report as a learner, for example, on this report, that was probably the biggest category that wasn't in executing or relationship building. Learner is part of strategic thinking. So if you have somebody who's a learner, they will get bored with whatever you've got them in. You'll have to continue to offer training opportunities, cross-functional opportunities into different directions, or they will most likely start innovating inside their current position. And if you're receptive to that, if you like the ideas that they're giving you, then allow them to take those ideas and implement them and create that change inside their position. But if that's not really allowed inside what they're doing, then offering them these cross-training opportunities may be a really good option. And so knowing that about a person, right? Like, are they a learner? Do they need to step into this other space sometimes to satisfy that side of themselves so they don't get bored and leave? Or are they not a learner? Is a cross-training opportunity going to be more stressful than it is productive? That's definitely another side to that coin. So this is just one way. Myers-Briggs is another, where you can get to know the individuals that you're working with and not just they're a cashier, they need to run the register, end of story. Who is the actual person that's on your staff, and how can you engage with them and create an experience for them at work that is personally satisfying? Again, tying back full circle to we're ultimately trying to reduce turnover in the long run. Team meetings, I would somewhat put in the category of employee development, but it's also so helpful for the store's operations overall. But in our experience, I chose to pay employees to be at the employee meeting because everybody for the most part is hourly. And so it's an expense. It's also typically got to happen outside of store hours so that everybody can be there. Otherwise, you have employees who are having to do operations. So scheduling it, paying for it, all of that probably means that you're only going to do this once or twice a year. But it can be so helpful to bring the entire team together because, again, at any given time, you only have a handful of your employees present in the store. So bringing everybody together can be really eye-opening for the staff to see, oh my gosh, look how many of us there are and whatnot. Also for the store, it helps you to deploy training that everybody needs. So for example, if you are rolling out online shopping and that's something that you want to train your entire staff on, it may make more sense to schedule a team meeting and train everybody at once than it would to track down on the training log and figure out, okay, who have I trained on this and who have I not, especially if it's something that's really in depth to train them on. Doing that multiple times through different rounds can be really a time consuming and a big burden to the person who's having to do the training. So the templates that I've left you here are one for a scavenger hunt, which serves as an icebreaker event at the very beginning. I like it. It gets them up moving. I typically would assign the teams so that there's people from cross departments working together. It's every introvert's nightmare. I'm an introvert and I still subject it on the team because it is so fun. Even if they're nervous and it's a little awkward getting started, once they start running around and doing the scavenger hunt, there's lots of laughter, there's yelling, there's working together, there's like breaking it up and like everybody's kind of helping and putting it all back together. So it's a fun, short little exercise to just kind of like lighten the mood in the setting. And so the scavenger hunt is also an opportunity for training, really, is how I looked at it. Like, okay, so all the time there's somebody coming in who says, do you have that little dried beef in a jar? Do you carry such and such? What days does the dry cleaning come back? Like these common questions that come up all the time that everybody needs to know the answers to these questions, right? These are common knowledge things. And so I would make questions like, what is the price of the dried beef in a jar? Because that means you'll have to know where it is. You'll have to go there. You'll have to find it. Or ask something like, how many ounces is it? Or something like that, where they have to go and like physically find the product. Other things like, how many followers do we have on Facebook, where they have to physically go and find the Facebook page. So little things like that, where you can, you're doing an icebreaker event, you're doing a scavenger hunt, it's fun, it's a team bonding experience. You're also slipping in some knowledge and some underlying education as they're doing their fun activity. And the other template is for setting up a round robin training as part of your team meeting. So this is where you can do different stations. Let's say there are in-depth trainings that need to be provided. Like one, you want to teach all your high school employees good phone etiquette, how to answer the phone, how to put someone on hold, how to transfer a call, what to say to the person on the other end of the phone while they're doing all of these things. So maybe that's one little section, but you don't really feel like your adult employees need to do that. But the adult employees do need to learn how to print off the picking tickets and how to, do this updated closing process and like whatever they need to do. So the round robin is to set up, multiple different training stations and then guide your different groups of employees, again, dividing them by responsibility level into these specific trainings that then you have, they spend 10 minutes at station one and then you rotate. And now you have this station that they're going to spend 10 minutes at. And you have this station. We did one station, for example, again, how to really get the most out of your budget for this team meeting is like one of our stations was how to run backstock. And so they ran all of backstock because 4 different groups went through it. So the first group got trained and they physically ran the backstock on aisle 1. And then the second group got trained and physically ran the backstock on aisle 2. And so on and so forth, so that by the end of the team meeting, we're there to learn, we're there to train. Backstock was completely ran. So that's a way that, like, really you don't have to make it be completely just training and talking. You can let it be hands-on and really get something valuable for the store in the process. And last but not least, on the managing side of things is what to do when employees leave. So whether they quit, you fire them, they get arrested and they go to jail, whatever it is, doesn't matter. They're not an active employee anymore. What are the steps that you need to take security-wise to make sure that they no longer have access to the areas where only employees should have access? So again, this really depends on who the employee was inside the organization. If it's a high school kid who was a bagger on the weekends, maybe you just deactivate their login, log out number, their employee discount, those kinds of basic things. Let's say your bookkeeper leaves. Updating your bank account, access, like at the bank, who can make withdrawals, who can make inquiries, updating your login information for your online banking, for your vendor accounts. If they had access to all of that stuff, changing the passwords on everything is highly encouraged. Obviously, you don't have to, but I would think you would want to. If you have key cards or door access, physical keys, fobs, cards, whatever it is, getting those back. If the employee was issued a laptop, getting that back. If they took home aprons or any other kind of store equipment or materials, bringing all of that back and collecting it. So not everything on the security checklist will always apply, but the security checklist is there to just keep a running list of these are all the potential things that may need to be turned off in the event an employee is no longer active within the company. That brings us to the end of another module. I hope you found it helpful. If you have any questions at all, my contact information is below. I would love to hear from you. I will do my best to help. And I would just like to say thank you again to the North Central Regional Planning Commission for partnering with me on these videos. And until next time, you take good care.